Is there an ancient prophecy that predicted artificial intelligence would be the beginning of the end for the human species? Well, there is, and I want to explain the wisdom of this prophecy to you. Everybody speaks about artificial intelligence either with excitement or an air of trepidation, and also for good reason. Though in the modern day, I would say there are more people excited about artificial intelligence, and I'm not sure for what reason, but we are in this age where technology has become a type of religion. Now, in the Hindu time system of the Yugas, there's almost a warning about artificial intelligence and also transhumanism, where there's a belief that artificial intelligence could even be the beginning of the Kali Yuga, which is considered the dark age, as opposed to Satya Yuga, which is considered the golden age. And I speak a little bit about this in my book, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, about this ancient prophecy of artificial intelligence and transhumanism as being a hallmark of the Kali Yuga. Now, before we go further into that, I need to explain to you briefly what the Yugas are. And we need to begin that with the concept of Kalpa, which is aeon. And I speak about this in my book, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, and I have a brief passage about what the system of the Yugas and Kalpa are. Kalpa is a Sanskrit word meaning aeon in Buddhist and Hindu cosmology. Kalpa is described in the ancient Indian texts of the Puranas, especially the Vishnu Purana and Bhagavata Purana. One Kalpa equals 4.32 billion years. Yep, that's right, 4.32 billion years. We are not talking about human lifetimes here or an age, but rather the life of the earth. To wrap your head around this, the long count system of one Kalpa is made up of 1,000 Mahayugas, which means great Yugas. The duration of a Mahayuga is built on a system of 4 Yugas. These Yugas are Satya Yuga, the ideal or truthful age spanning 1,728,000 years, Treta Yuga, the age where virtue is declined by a quarter spanning 1,296,000 years, Dwapara Yuga, the age where virtue is declined by half spanning 864,000 years, and last, and we could say the least, is Kali Yuga, where virtue is reduced to a quarter, spanning 432,000 years. Now, you're probably thinking that we are in the Satya Yuga, the golden age. A lot of people believe this. But when we look at the Hindu time system of the Yugas and we look at the authority of the Puranas, the Kali Yuga actually began 3102 BCE, according to Hindu authority, which symbolizes the death or the departure of Krishna from this world to the heavenly abode of Vaikuntha, the heavenly abode of Vishnu, who is a representation of Brahman, the ultimate reality. And so this happened during the Kurukshetra war, which is famously depicted within the Mahabharata. Most of you are probably familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, which is a small part of the Mahabharata. So you have this Kurukshetra war where Krishna departs the world to Vaikuntha, and this symbolizes the beginning of the Kali Yuga. So essentially the idea is that God has departed the world, or that people are turning away from the world within where Brahman is found, because we discover the Atman there, the undifferentiated consciousness, which connects us all as one with Brahman. Actually, there is no separation between us and Brahman. We are all Brahman alone. But this understanding is forgotten, and then our minds are turned externally to the material world. And so this is the beginning of the Kali Yuga, the 432,000 years cycle, if we take Hindu authority seriously in relation to this. And I've mentioned in a previous video before, you don't want to think about it in terms of cycles for humans, but rather the Yugas is not an anthropocentric system. It is mapping the cycles of the universe. The Yugas are about the life of the universe, not about humans. we often take things subjectively and we think that we are the center of the universe, so then we make the Yugas about ourselves. But it's not anthropocentric. And I'll leave a link for that video in the description below. But if we look at it from a universal perspective, the Kali Yuga began 3102 BCE, and we are only at the beginning of this 432,000 year cycle. Now, where artificial intelligence comes into play is when we look at the characteristic of the Kali Yuga. Now, the characteristic of the Kali Yuga is the devolution of our mind into gross matter. Materialism, then, is the heart of the Kali Yuga, as the mind becomes geared towards consumeristic thinking and externality in general. So humans devolve into materialism, and our focus is all external, where we turn our attention away from the inner world. And so our minds become so entangled with the external world that we forget our source. We forget our original nature and our original mind and our unified oneness with Brahman itself. So we forget all that because our mind becomes external, and then we start to think more and more dualistically, and we then perceive the world in that way, and so we forget that Brahman alone exists. And so when you think about it, as we go further and further into the external world, we're going to continue to want to become immortal, become entangled with material matter, and even become robots and so forth and so on, with the idea of transhumanism, right? So artificial intelligence is a byproduct of this Kali Yuga consciousness, where we have an external view of the world, and then we want some artificial brain to think for us, which then can free us to do more of nothing. And then what would be the purpose of humans in this world as artificial intelligence continues to become more intelligent? What would be the purpose of a human being? To sit back and watch Netflix all day? To drink beers from 9 to 5? What would be the purpose of our existence? What would be the purpose for creativity, for human creativity? Because we can just get a robot to make a movie, for example. Why would we need to do it? Which I'll talk about further in a minute. But as we go further into the external world, the more our minds become entangled with reality, that we become something we're actually not. And that's not even really the main danger. As you read from my quote in my book, virtue declines to a quarter, or intelligence declines to a quarter, and then we are in this low state of consciousness and we don't know how to get ourselves out of it. And so there is no surprise that artificial intelligence has come into play, right? So we've created something that will take over human productivity and even in some sense human creativity, which will continue to dumb us down. So intelligence will continue to decline. And let's be real, the intelligence devolution has already begun. It began with the advent of social media and smartphones. So for this 13, 14, 15 year period that we've had with social media and smartphones, you continually see IQ scores continue to decrease all around the world. And then you ask yourself, who reads anymore? Do people still read? Sadly, I barely see anyone that read, and even people who contact me would say they would rather watch my videos than read my books. And look, each to their own. But the problem is we're seeing a decline in people who even want to engage in the deep thinking required to read a book, because we've become so addicted to temporary pleasure and stimulation that we would prefer to watch videos and media rather than read a book. And so, as I said, with artificial intelligence, intelligence will continue to decline within humans. As I said, with low IQ scores all around the world continually going down each year. Even if we look at the vocabulary of a lot of people these days, it has dwindled since the early 1900s. I mean, I can pick up a book from the early 1900s, and in some sense, it can be pretty difficult to read because some people had a higher vocabulary than we do in this day and age. Everything is reduced to acronyms, and we warp words to suit the lack of intelligence that we have, and we think it's cool. But it's not cool because we don't have any command over the language that we have. But you find this mainly in English. In other languages, it is happening as well, but not as bad as within English. Let's look at grammar in this day and age, right? We have grammar tools, artificial intelligent grammar tools that can fix our phrasing up, fix our sentences up, and we don't have to pay too much attention, which then we lose the skill of understanding grammar. We lose the skill of creative writing, of intuitive writing, because we have a robot that fixes the grammar for us. And then we also have the advent of ChatGPT these days, right? Which people can use to do their homework for school. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Because when you use ChatGPT, you can see the lack of humanity within the actual writing. There's no flavor. You can tell it's not coming from a person because it is not imbued with the character and raw nature of a human being that is spontaneous rather than something that is made by us. And we're seeing industries being concerned about this, right? Like the movie industry and even editors and publishing and this and that, because publishers and movie studios can just employ an artificial intelligent machine to edit a book, to write a film script, and it will be completely inhumane. You'll be able to tell that there's no person behind this. And even if it gets clever, there still will lack that humanness about it, because humans are organic. They aren't created. We come out of the universe. We weren't created and put into the universe. We come through it, right? And so the ultimate intelligence moves through us as well. That's how we can create something like artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is like throwing a snake in the grass. We got to a heightened point of intelligence where we created artificial intelligence, but it's like throwing a snake in the grass. Same with social media, right? We were getting to places of peace and equanimity, and we were striving towards a harmonious world, but then we created social media, threw a snake in the grass. Now we're all going around fighting for our own causes, but we're causing more conflict in the process. And so we continually throw a snake in the grass, and we inhibit our own real progress as opposed to the fake progress that companies and media and social media claim to be the champions of. And so if we continue to go down this path, why would anyone write a book? Why would anyone make a movie if they can just employ ChatGPT to do it? But ask yourself this, and I know that this may be far-fetched, but who will be your children's doctor in the future? Who will fly the planes for your children to travel the world? Who will do many things, right? And I know that that may sound far-fetched, but the further and further we continue to outsource our skills and our own creativity, the less intelligent we will naturally become. And the evidence is there with the dwindling IQ scores all around the world. So who will be your grandchildren's doctor when they have a heart issue, for example? And you see this in Korea now, where there is a particular doctor who is a heart surgeon, and he's one of a kind, and no one has learned how to achieve his skill because he comes from many, many years ago, and he's in his 80s and he's still performing operations. So this is crazy, right? Someone who is at a younger age is still not at his level, and the skill that he has is so refined that there's no one that can do it, and he's trying to teach people, and still they cannot embody this skill. And so what I want to ask you is, when will this continual outsourcing end? A lot of people will always say that, oh, it's just innocent, it makes my life better. But you're continually outsourcing skills and creativity and just productivity itself. And we are continually losing our intelligence and our adaptive skills towards the world. Our ability to intuitively think. We are losing all of this because we continually outsource our skills. And so it's not that, oh, it's just like this, Jason, it's just an innocent thing. No need to worry about it. But now we're at the stage where we're actually outsourcing our own creativity. Someone's just going to make a music album in the future, and there will be no someone behind it. It might just be a robot named Daisy, for example, made this album. And so why would we listen to that if there's no real heart behind it? But you could fool anyone, right? And there will be justifications for it, because people even make justifications for artificial intelligence in this day and age. And so for the first time in history, and many people have spoken about this, the next generation will be dumber than the last generation. And that rarely happens, if has happened ever, right? Because the next generation usually pick up where the older one left off and can build upon it. But what we've done with all of this technology and outsourcing is we're completely pulling everything apart, and people are focused on things that make completely no sense and are triggered and sensitive because they can't put their mind on anything, no skill, no productivity, because there's no need to do that, right? And so IQ scores continue to dwindle. And so for the first time in history, we have a generation that will be dumber than the last. And so as you see, artificial intelligence is the beginning of this decline into the Kali Yuga, where we continually become less intelligent, our virtue begins to dwindle, and then who knows what world we'll live in 1,000 years' time from now, right? Unless we pump the brakes on this continual outsourcing and realize our own innate gift that we can give the world. And so what can we do about this? Well, the way out of this is pretty simple, and it's not rocket science. First of all, how much time do you spend in front of a screen? Think about it. Do you spend more time in front of a screen than not in front of a screen? Do you put your children in front of a screen from when they're born till they go into school and they continue that throughout their teenage life and their adult life? Are they being trained in front of a screen, or are you allowing them to live with life so that they can cognitively develop naturally as people over 40, like my age and older, developed when we were younger? We weren't born in front of a screen, and so you can develop naturally. You can understand facial cues, you can understand certain subtle sensibilities, and you have natural compassion and forgiveness for others. So instead of you looking at a screen or putting your children in front of a screen, why not pick up a book? A simple method to a big problem, right? Pick up a book. And when you begin to read, it'll probably be tough for you if you've spent a lot of time in front of a screen. But the more you get into a book and the more you structure your life a certain way to cultivate intelligence as opposed to being a passive consumer of media content, it's a little bit of a change, right? It might take a little bit of time, but you're changing your life from a passive consumer to an active person who cultivates intelligence. And now I'm sure that's why a lot of you are on the channel and you watch my videos, and that's great. And I love that you're here, but make sure you don't spend all your day on YouTube, for example. We need to find that balance. The next method to counter this is very simple. Look within. Begin to look within and understand your own nature. Now, the irony here is that in looking within, this increases intelligence. This is what buddhi is in Sanskrit, right? Buddhi is this universal intelligence. And this universal intelligence is developed from within out, right? So we cultivate it as we observe ourselves more. We understand the raw material of our being, and we come back into contact with that pure one non-dual consciousness that we all are. And then the more we abide in that, the more we have access to the buddhi, right? So we have access to this universal intelligence. And in doing so, we reveal that oneness is the ultimate reality. And that comes from continually having that impartial mind, right? You have an impartial mind where you don't have a vested interest in this or that, but you observe life and you move according to the terrain of life, but without having a bias or prejudice for anything, right? Because once you have a bias or a prejudice, then you are measuring reality according to this or that, which is the illusion of Maya, right? Having a partial mind where you are judging reality based on your likes and dislikes according to the conditioning that you've endured. And all of our conditioning is different, right? So whose conditioning is right? Whose conditioning is wrong? Neither. They're neither right nor wrong, but the truth is that oneness is the ultimate reality, and the only way to come into harmony with that is to have an impartial mind, is to not dissect reality up into this and that, but just to see reality as it is. Brahman alone is what reality truly is. It's truly one. And so the problem is, as we endure this conditioning, right, we develop dualistic thinking based on the illusion that the material world is dualistic and is not the one ultimate Brahman. So we develop more of this dualistic thinking. This is what makes it difficult for most people to understand the oneness of reality, because they can't escape this dualistic thinking because they've been trained to have this subjective view of the world, right? They have this subjective lens of how they dissect the world up into this and that. dissect the world up according to how they think the world should be. And all that does is just inculcate dualistic thinking. That's all it does. So what you need to do is just say no to materialism, to say no to this idea that there's a dualistic world, but rather that there's actually one undifferentiated Brahman expressing itself in many different ways, but never losing sight that it's one, right? And working on thinning out that dualistic thinking. And sadly, all that's going to happen with artificial intelligence is it's only going to enhance dualistic thinking, right? Because it's created from a mind that is dual. It is created on the illusion that reality is this or that. And then it's only going to continue to fragment our mind. And so we're going to go down this rabbit hole within the Kali Yuga of thinking the world is this and that, and we forget the ultimate Brahman, right? This is why Vyasa, the great sage, left all of these scripts behind, because he knew that the spiritually starved within the Kali Yuga will need guidance. And that's what we're all doing here, right? We are the spiritually starved, and we are seeking guidance, and we are the ones who can tell what's going to happen in the future through all of these advents through technology, right? Because technology is the new religion of the day, and many people don't realize that, right? Especially when they're clinging to their phone and they're so absorbed what's going on inside the phone, they are completely blind to the world around them. And so all in all, if you say no to materialism, you say no to this dualistic thinking, then you realize that human creativity and intelligence is far more interesting than any robot or any form of artificial intelligence. Nature itself is organic, and we are nature. And we are expressing that mystery through our nature. That mystery is part of the spontaneous nature of reality, of the universe. But artificial intelligence, on the other hand, is created. It is man-made. And so it's inorganic and in some sense predictable because it is built for a certain purpose. Where a human is definitely not predictable and definitely not certain, because that's the real reality that we live in. And so all in all, with everything I've said, do you believe that artificial intelligence is the beginning of the Kali Yuga? Do you see an existential threat in AI? I will leave that up to you, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Shanti, shanti, shanti.